What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back with another Borderlands 2 video, and as a request that some of you guys made on Twitter a little while back, I figured that along with my level 80 OP10 Axton build, that it might be a good idea to put together a new level 80 version of how I would build Maya the Siren. Now, like my last level 80 build video, I'm going to be going over Maya's skill tree relatively in depth. I'll be going over what skills are good and what skills are worth avoiding, and I'll also be discussing some gear recommendations as well. So if you're having a hard time figuring out what gear to use or where to put your skill points, then this video is going to have you covered. And as a fun little request of you guys before I get into everything, I'd like to know what your all's favorite head customization for Maya is. Is your favorite Sleek and Suave, Alkaline Mistress, Nevermore, Pretty and Punk, or do you all like the newly added Toxic Defender that got added with the Lilith DLC? Definitely let me know in the comment section below, and also don't forget to smash like on this video for a free Higgs boson. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and get started here by going over the most important decision you will need to make when putting together a Maya build. At this point in Borderlands 2's life, I'd say the only real choice you have to make is whether you want to put together a more solo or co-op focused build. With the new level cap, you should have enough points to really optimize Maya's phase lock regardless of how you build, since most of the important phase lock skills that boost duration and cooldown go no higher than tier 4 in any one subtree. So as long as you aren't pumping more than 26 or so points into any one subtree, you should be able to get the majority of the important skills that you'll need for phase lock to work as efficiently as possible. So again, the main decision that you're going to have to make is whether you want a solo or a co-op build. But while you determine that, let's go over Maya's various subtrees in more depth and discuss what skills are good, what skills are bad, and how you should progress through each of the trees. The first subtree I'd like to go over here is Cataclysm. Of the three, I think Cataclysm is best described as the most offensive-based and contains a number of skills that will really help boost Maya's attack power. Skills like Ruin allow for Maya's phase lock to slag enemies, while skills like Cloud Kill provide powerful corrosive damage, while another skill like Reaper provides a powerful damage boost to enemies that are above 50% health. I also think Cataclysm is the easiest tree to allocate points for, since the path of the skills to take here is pretty straightforward, with really only one choice that you have to make as far as skill point allocation goes. For tier 1, go with Foresight. For tier 2, pick Immolate. For tier 3, pick up Chain Reaction and Cloud Kill. For tier 4, pick up Reaper. And then for tier 5, you can either put points into tier 5's Blight Phoenix or tier 2's Helios. After that, just pick up Ruin in tier 6 and you're pretty much set. Now the reason you'd want to go this route is because the skills selected are usually better than the other skills that reside within their respective tier. As an example, Foresight is just better than Flicker, and this same principle affects pretty much every other skill we've selected as well, as Immolate tends to be better than Helios, while Chain Reaction and Cloud Kill tends to be better and more useful than Backdraft. In my opinion, the only real lacking skill in this subtree is Flicker, as you're not really going to need improved elemental effect chance. I've also skipped Backdraft as well, which isn't a terrible skill, but I think is simply more niche than either Cloud Kill or Chain Reaction, where the two of those are going to be used a lot more than a skill that will emit a Nova when your shield depletes, or emits a Nova when you melee enemies. So regardless of whether you go solo or co-op, I'd recommend taking the path that I've just outlined for the Cataclysm subtree. This brings us to our next subtree, which is the Harmony tree. Now, how you allocate your points here is going to greatly depend on whether you're doing a solo or a co-op build. If you go the co-op route, picking up Restoration and Res is a must. Both of these skills will come in handy for helping your fellow co-op partners, as Restoration allows you to shoot your friends while healing them, while Res allows you to phase lock your friends and revive them from a distance. If you decide not to go the co-op route, it's simply a matter of focusing on other skills that reside within the Harmony tree. Since you don't have to put points into Restoration, those skill points could easily go into Mind's Eye, and the skill point freed up by not investing in Res could be used to allow you to round out investment in another skill elsewhere in either the Harmony tree or even another subtree. I'd say that for either solo or co-op builds though, you're going to definitely want to pick up Sweet Release in Tier 1, Wreck in Tier 2, and Elated in Tier 3. All three of these skills work really well with Phase Lock, as the first allows you to heal off orbs that emit upon defeating a phase-locked enemy, while Wreck provides a damage and fire rate boost, and Elated provides a passive healing boost while you have an enemy phase-locked. The only skills I'd say you should avoid here are mainly Recompense and possibly Sustenance. Recompense is a skill that allows the player to take health damage and have a % chance of dealing that damage back to attackers. To really use this skill, you need the Warder Comm to ensure you have the highest chance of dealing damage back, and really I think because you have to use the Warder Comm, it's just impractical. As for Sustenance, I'd probably avoid it on solo builds, but would definitely recommend it for more co-op focused builds, especially if you're using the legendary Nurse Comm, as that class mod boosts Sustenance and makes it more effective. That said, don't make it a point to max Sustenance out, and just put 1 point here if you have 1 point to spare. In general though, just make sure you know whether you're putting together a co-op or solo build before you start to really invest in the Harmony subtree. This brings us to our final subtree, which is Motion. This tree offers a great complement of skills that you'll want to boost your defense and offense, while also offering skills that will allow you to optimize Phase Lock. In the case of solo and co-op builds, you should be able to get the majority of the Phase Lock related skills here, like Tier 2 Suspension, Tier 3's Converge, and Tier 4's Quicken. There's also Tier 5 Subsequence, which is great when maxed out, as it allows your Phase Lock to potentially chain to other enemies, though given it's a high tier within the tree itself, there is a possibility you may not be able to get it, and if you can't max it out, don't bother putting any points here. As for Tier 1, I'd recommend you pick up both Ward and Accelerate if you're doing a solo build, while you can just pick up Ward if you're putting together a co-op build. Once you've picked up and maxed out both of these or one of these, simply make sure you pick up Suspension and Converge and use the remaining 4 points needed to reach Tier 4 to boost either Tier 1's Accelerate or Tier 3's Inertia. After that, pick up the Quicken skill, and then pick up Subsequence if you have the points to max it out. As for our bad or lame skills in this tree, I'd say the only one is Thought Lock. Maybe one of you can let me know a great use for it in the comments section below, but in my experience, this skill actually takes what is great about Phase Lock, which is locking enemies in place, and replaces it with the ability to enthrall enemies instead. Feel free to disagree, but I'm not a huge fan of Thought Lock, and the leftover point here would be better used in rounding out another one of your skills within this subtree. As for the other skills we didn't pick, Fleet is a good skill to use with the Rough Rider to get a speed boost, while Kinetic Reflection is okay, but only works against enemies that fire bullets, and thus you may find the other skill within Tier 2, Suspension, is just more useful. Ultimately, this is how I would spec within the Motion subtree. Just remember, if you can't max out Subsequence, that you're really just better off putting those points elsewhere. Now that we've gone over all three of the various skills and all three of the various subtrees, I think we are now ready to discuss our builds. And we'll go ahead here and start with the solo build. As you can see from the skill tree that I'm showcasing here, I've put 26 points into both Cataclysm and Motion, following most of the advice that I just recommended when discussing both of these subtrees. As for Harmony, I've put the remaining 23 points we have available here to acquire Mind's Eye and avoid many of the more co-op focused skills like Restoration and Res. Also, and compared to what we might normally be able to do at level 72, we now have an additional 8 skill points to take advantage of. And I think the best place to put these points is to max out Elated, which will give us some passive health regen while an enemy is phase locked, and Life Tap, which is a kill skill that will give us some life steal, which is similar to what you might see on a Moxie weapon. Both of these skills will help with our survivability, and Life Tap in particular can be useful as you progressively get kills. Something else you may have noticed is that we've gone ahead and picked up pretty much every Tier 1 skill with this skill tree setup, with the exception of Flicker. The reason I chose to do this is because all of these skills work really well with the legendary Siren comm, which is going to be the class mod you use on a solo build 80 to 90% of the time. Additionally, we have the side benefit of also speccing for Wreck and Reaper, which should give us great compatibility with both the normal cat and the legendary cat class mods as well for when you plan to use SMGs. As far as potential substitutions go, the one class mod that's really the most alien to this kind of setup is the Banshee comm. While you can benefit from the boosts to Immolate, you'll really need to respec provided you want to use either Fleet or Backdraft. Typically, I'd recommend subbing whatever points you'd put into Helios or Blight Phoenix and put those into Backdraft. Fleet is a little more complex, but assuming you're using the Rough Rider shield with it, what I would do in this scenario is simply cut your investment in Ward and then put those points into Fleet. So in the end, and using our normal solo build as an example, you would be going from this to something more like this. All I've done here is respec so we now have Backdraft and Fleet, but otherwise everything else is essentially the same. In the end, I think you'll find this skill tree build and its substitution should have you covered for solo play at level 80. So now I think it's about time we discussed co-op play at level 80. Unlike our more solo-focused build, the first thing that should stick out here is that we've gone ahead and gotten both res and restoration. As mentioned when discussing the Harmony tree, these will definitely come in handy for co-op. Additionally, and compared to our solo tree, I've gone ahead and invested pretty heavily into the Harmony tree more than I have for the Motion tree, being sure to max out both Life Tap and also get the Scorn Capstone. While this means we lose out on subsequence, you can use the leftover 3 points or so that would normally go here, and you can then allocate them in the following ways. For the main spec, what I've gone ahead and done is use the remaining points to round out Inertia and Wreck. For my level 72 version of this setup, I didn't have the skill points to max these, and now that we do have the skill points, we might as well just max them out. As for the last skill point, I've decided to put it into Sustenance, and while I wouldn't recommend you do this normally, I think it makes sense to do it for a co-op build because you're going to be using the Legendary Nurse comm, and the Legendary Nurse comm just so happens to boost the skill. Simply putting 1 point here can bring you to 6 out of 5, which allows for about 2.4% maximum health regen per second, which you may find is overkill and can make Maya pretty tanky when combined with the likes of Sweet Release, Elated, and Life Tap. As a substitution to this, you could also decide not to round out your investment in Inertia and Wreck and simply opt for putting those points into Accelerate and Mind's Eye. The idea behind doing this is that it would allow you to use the legendary Siren and Cat class mods, which would open up your class mod choice and could potentially allow you to get a damage boost in a co-op setting if you really needed it. I think we can agree that a more dedicated build optimizing around these class mods would be better, but if you're in a co-op setting and you need a nice little damage boost, putting 1 point into both Accelerate and Mind's Eye and then switching to a legendary Siren or a legendary Cat class mod isn't a bad idea. Like the main spec though, be sure to put that third and final point into Sustenance, as that way you could still take advantage of the Legendary Nurse comm. At this point though, I think that should wrap up both skill tree builds for solo and co-op play. It's now time we talked about gear, and to start, I think it would be best if we started off by talking about class mods. Now both of these builds should allow you to use just about any class mod that's available for Maya. Granted, the legendary Siren and Cat are probably going to work best for the solo build, while the legendary Nurse will probably work best for the co-op build, but between both, you should be getting a wide amount of compatibility, which should allow you to swap out class mods if you so desire. Of the two, I think the co-op build has a little bit better potential for compatibility, but you should find you can use 90% of the class mods on either build. As far as weapons go, I'd recommend pretty much anything. However, given Maya's affinity for SMGs, it's worth noting that many of your favorite SMGs also just so happen to be great choices for the character. You may want to stay away from Meteors, but things like the Sandhawk, the family-friendly SMG, the Hellfire, Tatler, and Lascaux are all great choices in conjunction with the legendary Cat class mod. Another weapon type that works well on Maya are sniper rifles. This is mainly thanks to phase lock, as you can use it to lock enemies in place for easy headshots. You can use any of your favorite snipers for Maya, whether it be popular choices like the Pimpernel or Lyuda. However, I do think there are a few snipers you should seek out in particular. Something like the Cobra is pretty decent with Maya's Converge and Ruin, since you can more easily take advantage of the Cobra's splash damage potential. Plus, you may also find something like the Longbow, provided you're playing with a controller and aim assist, also works pretty well on Maya because the enemies are locked in place with phase lock, and you don't have to worry about not having a scope. But again, most of the good snipers in the game, whether they be things like the Snider, Droog, or whatever else you can think of, should work pretty well on Maya. Shield-wise, I'd say you can really use any of the greats. Using the B-Shield makes a lot of sense on solo builds, provided you pair it with the Sandhawk, though you can really use any of your other fan-favorite shields too, whether it be things like the Sham, Antagonist, Blockade, or whatever else you can think of. That said, if you plan on using the Backdraft skill at all, it might be a good idea to get your hands on a Transformer, as when it's combined with a Shock Elemental Slow Hand, you can trigger Backdraft at will, which can be surprisingly effective and deal a decent amount of damage. So I suppose keep that in mind if you plan on using that skill extensively. As far as relics go, I'd recommend pretty much all the relics I recommended in the Axton video. Bone of the Ancients is best, followed by the Heart of the Ancients and or Mouthwash, depending on what weapons you're using. That said, and assuming you're playing in more of a co-op role, it might be a good idea to check out the Might of the Seraphs relic. This relic provides melee override cooldown and would be useful when combined with Scorn. So if you're using Scorn a lot, you may want to check out the Might of the Seraphs. But otherwise, just go ahead and stick with either a Bone of the Ancients, a Heart of the Ancients, or the Mouthwash. For grenades, I'd probably just recommend you stick with the Magic Missile or a Slag Bouncing Betty Grenade if you're doing any raids. If you have Scorn, you might be able to substitute either of these with something else, but I'd probably stick to something like the Electric Chair, the Chain Lightning, or the Stormfront, as all three would be good in conjunction with Life Tap and with any Moxie weapons you might be using. Typically on Maya, I just use grenades as another method of slagging without having to swap weapons, so either stick to a slag grenade or stick to something that deals quick and near instant damage, like a Tesla grenade, if you want something that's more offensive based. Ultimately though, I'd say most of the good gear you can think of should work pretty well on Maya. Obviously, try to avoid things like Roid Shield since Maya's not great with melee, but with some experimentation, I think you'll find that she is good with a lot of different items. But at the end of the day, guys, I think this video is pretty much wrapped up as we've gone over Maya pretty in depth, from everything from her skill tree, to what builds I'd recommend, and even to what gear I'd recommend. I hope this video helped you guys out, and my goal is to try to get to more of a normal upload schedule over these next couple of months. June has just been a total mess, but I think July, August, and definitely September will be a lot better. As always, like this video if you liked it, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more Borderlands videos, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.